Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's SAS webinar, Taking People Analytics from Good to Great, Skills Gap Analysis. I'm Brendan Bailey from SAS, your host for today. Now let's meet today's SAS presenters. As a solutions architect at SAS, Blake's career in HR began as an HR strategy consultant. Later worked within SAS's HR department, learning applied workforce analytics. After seeing his MBA with a focus on decision analytics, he now consults with HR departments, helping them transform their role in the organization to become a strategic analytics partner. Also joining us today is Sarah Harden, a systems engineer at SAS. Sarah has worked in quantitative analytics for 5 years, and her background is in applied sciences and modeling. Before coming to SAS, she worked in Deloitte's workforce analytics practice, where she helped clients to build and implement quantitative solutions regarding best practices for their workforce. Blake, Sarah, thanks for joining us today. Blake, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And I'll get my screen sharing here. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is a fourth in our series on taking people analytics from good to great. We're focused on skills gap analysis, and I have to mention there's a special thanks to two people on the bottom right here. Vinicius, really the ruler of things analytical. He and Bruce really helped out with today's content for this webinar, so special thanks to them. With a quote I shared in the last webinar from Dave Court. He works at Young Brands, and he did a presentation for MIT Sloan talking about meeting strategy goals with HR analytics. And what he said in that presentation was that right now HR analytics is still a competitive advantage, and in the next 3 to 5 years it won't be a competitive advantage. It'll be a hindrance. If you aren't doing it, your competitors will be. They'll be getting better at attracting, engaging, and retaining their employees, and hopefully that'll help impact the bottom line. And I think that's important is because as we go through this skills gap analysis and we start seeing some of the macro trends that are happening in the HR space, is really going to become an issue. So ahead of that, I believe is part of why we're all here today. Now, we are today in this webinar in good company and in good competition. The collective revenue of the company that registered for this webinar is in excess of $1 trillion. So a lot of great companies are with us today. 75 have a billion in revenue or more. And we're across 11 major industries and 14 different countries. And we have 8 out of 11 of the U.S. national government bodies represented. So really put the pressure on to me. And when I was selecting icons for this presentation, I was one of a diamond, and I said, man, with all this pressure, this is a sign of good luck. But then I just scrolled down a little bit, and I saw this one of a mine car and a bunch of coal. So we'll see how it goes today. Now has been facilitating this mantra for a while, the attract, grow, retain, and I've shared this in the previous webinar, but this life cycle of an employee, from the time we're looking for them to the time that we recruit them, onboard them, grow them, re-engage and retain them, we're trying to identify ways to increase the cumulative value that they bring to our organization while they're with us. And the series has really been about how can we do best candidate analysis to help with attracting and hiring and onboarding, and part 2 was about engaging. The third was about predicting turnover, and today we're getting to skills gap analysis and how do we grow people. Skills gap analysis impacts across the board here because I think it's a way that you can enable doing the other 3 parts that are on here, but I didn't want to be cheesy and just put a big circle around everything and say skills gap solves all HR's problems. So let's why now for skills gap analysis, then talk about how SAS helps in identifying the gaps, and then Sarah will walk us through the technology and the way that we approach that. of why now this has been a theme throughout the series about the workforce crisis that looms in 2030. Shaq's TED Talk, we know how many people are going to be in the workforce in 2030 unless people get born and age super fast. But 9 of the 10 major labor economies will be in a labor shortfall. And the reasons for that are that we are going to have more jobs than people. And on the exact day of part 3 of this series, May 9th, was a post on LinkedIn that said we now have more jobs than we do people to fill. So we're definitely moving into this over the next decade, and which jobs it's hitting and which industries it's hitting first. It's definitely become more prevalent. But I get this question when I share this with customers is, will automation make up the difference, right? Is it going to be able to remove as many jobs so we can keep growing? And to speak to that, I think that's part of what we're seeing with the skills mismatch. And I found some research that talks to this. But here's a graphic. The point is not to be able to read all the countries on the graphic here, but this is a graphic that's just showing the increase in robots per worker by country. And there are 2 countries that I could find some research on that are focusing on automation. So Germany and Sweden are trying to turn to automation to meet labor demand. Here's another posting that says robots seem to be creating as many, if not more, jobs than they're displacing. So BMW and Electrolux, which are mentioned in this the piece from the Wall Street Journal, specifically to how, yes, it replaced some jobs, but now we have all these other needs that we need. And the skills that we need for these new jobs, we don't necessarily have the people for them. So it's creating a bigger issue with the skill mismatch, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today. So people who have the skills that are needed, we get this topic of culture wars. Why use any company over another? And really the culture and alignment is a big portion of that. So in part 1 of the webinar, a year ago, we mentioned that computer science graduates, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, received 3.5 job offers at the time of graduation. So at least 3 choices. Today we talked about the Bureau of Labor Statistics follows quit rates, which is confidence to leave a full-time job and get a new job, a better job, greener pastures. That is at an all-time high. And then, you know, this one was 2 days ago was interesting to read. It's a good time to switch careers because employers are trying the skill and degree requirements in order to attract more candidates. It seems a little bit desperate, but it's definitely an issue, right? Companies are saying, well, I'll take more people in and I'll figure out how to train them with the skills they need. But this point around the workforce in general shifting from an employer orientation to a talent orientation. And this is the first time that we're seeing this, where really we have more jobs than we do people. So there are so many organizations interested in this, and I broke this down into different levels and just pulled together a couple of data points. So the 2018 Conference Board CEO survey, the #1 issue was failure to attract and retain top talent above disruptive technology and competitors. Perhaps this is because you can't be disrupted by technology or competitors if you can't keep the lights on, or perhaps better said, if you don't have someone to turn on the lights. But this issue at the top side, and then upper management, Deloitte's new organization model talks about how this group is going to phase out the hierarchical model and transition to teams which are able to assemble and stop quickly to meet the pace of change in the world today. So technology and competitors, and we have people. How do we get the right people on the right team to accomplish these new tasks? And then on the level, the decision is that managers own teams and assign tasks. The newer organizational model is a manager facilitates projects and seeks out people based on their skills. contributors, as we were mentioning, that workforce orientation shift, it empowers employees to require more from their employers. So these are all different drivers towards the labor we have today. So it definitely has its seat at the table. How is it going to facilitate these growing business challenges? Because certainly in the middle here, there needs to be more information on employee skills and abilities to be able to do this. And the HR needs to be at the table there as well, helping provide guidance around, well, these employees have these skills, and this is how we can leverage them. As employees are having more power and talent is having more power, can either serve the business and employees concurrently, and what's the best way to do that? So here's food thought. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you may be familiar with, but it's a hierarchy where people are essentially out looking to fulfill physiological needs, right? Food, warmth, rest, and then safety needs, security, and belonging in relationships and friends, and then prestige and feeling accomplishment and achieving one's full potential on that top tier. So naturally, if employees are going to have, and talent are going to have more and looking to get more needs, what does that look like for the organization? How is it going to facilitate that without breaking the bank, right? I was in a house where my father wanted to have a safe and secure job, right? That was number one thing in having a long-term career. Where people are getting 3+ job offers at the time of graduation and are moving between jobs so quickly. Safety and security of a job is somewhat assumed at this point. So as we move up the chain, how is that going to be different? And this is culture wars really starts to begin. But it's a layer, achieving one's full potential. Who stands from that? Is it the employee or is it the employer? Because I think a good challenge is to find a way as HR and as a business, how do we align the business's potential and a person's potential? And this begins a lot with understanding what skills do they have, what are their desires in growing their skills, et cetera. How do we get to mirror that what the business is trying to do, and how do we set up our processes, et cetera, to facilitate that kind of interaction? Another thought leader, Heather McGowan, she was a LinkedIn 2017 top voice. But this is like the career my father followed, right? He went to school, he got an MBA, he started a job, facilitated a career path, ended up going up the career ladder, and then retired. But this is a lot different in today's world, right? Heather talks about how it's an era of income generation, right? If my skills are in demand, and that my current job and company is not going to recognize that those skills are in demand, and it's going to take me a year that I have to wait to get a 50% increase, well, I can go over here to where a company is going to give me a 15 or 20% increase for the skills that are in demand now. And internally, being from an HR organization myself in my career there, specifically in compensation, I know that if you promote people and you give large increases to people, it affects those around them, right? So if you have, there are a lot of considerations to be able to make this new world work. So how is HR going to take this new career path? Because certainly in that learn layer, a lot of skills gap in development can happen. How is HR going to identify those skills and facilitate that path? How we actually identify these gaps, and in order to do that, I need to level set a little bit on SAS and how it works. SAS, an analytics platform. So the biggest part of that is being able to connect and unify a lot of data. So not all the data that's mapped on here on the left is necessarily used in skills gap analysis, but SAS is able to connect and sit on top of any data that you have and be able to prepare that data for analysis. It's got role-based security, and it can do data quality as it ingests different sources into it, and it creates that single version of truth to start doing some analysis on. So it's an replace type of thing. It's sit on top of data, connect to the data, find a standard way of bringing that, or let that help you find a standard way of bringing that data in from where natural format is stored to analyze, and then do all the fun stuff. Bring all your analytics, all your different users, all different coding languages, environments, to start doing different types of analyses. So this being skills gap, but similar SAS software and structure and framework was used to do the predicting turnover and the best candidate analysis, et cetera. It's all facilitated by the same set of tools. And are there limits to the data that you're able to access for analysis? And generally people, when I'm talking to people in HR, they think of just their HR data systems, but there are operational platforms in finance and your CRM software, perhaps supply chain or other industry-specific platforms that connect and bring that data for you to leverage in analytics as well. And same thing, productivity. So the analytics platform is able to connect to all of these others. It's good to enable yourself with a tool that's able to do so. More of a corporate slide, but just to share, there are different third-party graphics here, and it's around being able to have an analytics platform, artificial intelligence and analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, and then also text analytics, which these three really represent a lot of what was leveraged in doing the skills gap analysis, but SAS is definitely equipped to be there and help you move forward. Full set on SAS. Let's talk more about the skills gap. So do the skills that each employee has, and typically most, right? So if we look at just one seat, right, one position, and over time we get people in and leave, and then we hire somebody new and they leave, and then so on and so forth. But typically HR knows people the best when they're hiring them. We understand the resume, we do some interviews, we have a fairly good understanding of the employee at that time. Where that is stored and kept and leveraged is and have some future skills that are needed that are typically under control. That job posting gets customized a little bit about what the job needs, but is there any way that we could have known that beforehand and started the hiring process sooner? And then people, and this is where I see HR organizations a lot of challenges, when they're actually in our organization, how have their skills evolved? I think people here at SAS with tenured careers of 30 years or 40 years, where's the breadcrumb trail on all of their skills, and how do we fill that gap? Because, you know, days 40 years ago certainly weren't thinking about this. So there are a lot of holes to fill, and we'll talk how we close those with analytics. And then what gaps are we creating when that happens? That's a big one. This was just one seat. So if we multiply this across all of the roles in the organization and all the things that are happening concurrently, that macro picture of all the skills that we have and the skills that we need in the future is really difficult to understand. And then how does it look like by department and team to service the upper and management who are facing those challenges around being able to leverage people more effectively. A couple of the common barriers to skill gap analysis that I hear when I talk with customers. Number the data, and we talked about that on the prior slide. People have been here for a while, or after we hire them, we didn't really keep track. We have a learning management system. We know some things, or we have strength finders. We have that kind of data. but we have that full picture. And certainly for their historical, maybe they joined us, they have 15 years of experience, they've only been with us for a year. How do we get what happened in the 14 years? And this is where analytics can really help generate some current skill data on employees, whether they've been with us for a long time or not. There's a way that we can leverage text analytics to start generating data for us. Not knowing future requirements, and this is where we can use forecasting and text analytics again to figure out what future skills we are going to need. And then also with all of this generated skills data, it enables the teams to move more quickly, be assembled, and move on to the next task as we are helping business facilitate their goals. And the skill proficiency is hard to define, and I would agree it is hard to define, but we do get to use text output to help create skill proficiency levels as well. And then prioritize training. This is it have a way to drill down by function and job and look at it at an employee level. And using predictive analytics, we can say, here's somebody who's maybe 70% of a job fit, and if we just help them with these few skills, we can be a 90% fit. So the things that we get to look at today. So they're doing this, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah. But the process for how do you generate this data, assign these different skills, et cetera, in a way that's operational, and start generating that data using text analytics and assign those to current jobs. So in our demonstration, mining thousands of job postings that are out there. And in this example, we have a data architect job role and a business analyst job role. And from our text mining, we're able to identify that data architects have, in the simple example, 3 skills, and the business analyst has 2. We're all able to do this for all of our other jobs, including future jobs that we would need. So if we're going to hire a data scientist and we've never done one before, we can approach it the same way. Let's figure out the different skills that are typically associated with that, and then put into a job and skills repository, validate those skills for those different jobs and job families, and then employees. So here we have Joe. Joe, you can see his job history. He was a data architect and a business analyst. So what we know about Joe is likely he has Excel, big data, SQL, and finance. And Excel is used in multiple jobs. It is proficient. But then we get to validate that information about Joe, either through his manager or in combination with Joe and his manager, but some way to say, let's jumpstart the process. We think Joe does X. Does he do it or not? And we can start to visualize it. We know that for our business and the way that we need to go forward, that we have a forecast. We've predicted who's going to be leaving. We are able to identify likely the skills that we are going to need for future jobs. So we get to look at solutions engineer, which seems to be our favorite job through these webinars, because it's a mixture of Sarah and I's job title. But future job we need is a solutions engineer. What we do is take Joe and do a predictive model and identify some gaps between his current skills and his future skills, and develop some training around the skills that he might need, and predict how well he's going to fit into this group, and then start to close those gaps. So here he has a predicted job fit score of 68%. Why only 68%? Well, Joe needs more analytics training and communication training, and could fit into this new job. So let's send Joe to training for these different things. All right. So now let's see some of the text analytics side and some of the technology. So I'll pass it over to Sarah.
All right. So that Blake was talking about, and I think one of the big trends that we're seeing in basically in the market across the board when it comes to technology is the ability to take unstructured text or unstructured data and make meaning out of it. So we started on this particular piece of our presentation. Basically, the term text analytics describes a set of linguistic, statistical, machine techniques that can model and structure information content from textual sources. So you can have, and that's just in regards to text, right? There's tons of unstructured data. But basically, what we're using this for specifically is we're going to use SAS technology to scale, basically to scale human acts of reading, organizing, quantifying unstructured text in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of use cases for text. What we're really going to see, and what we've done so far, really is categorization, so automating categorization of a lot of information, right, coming in. Like Blake was saying, it's tens of thousands of job descriptions and resumes and things like that. And then contraction, right? So part of being able to, as a human, when we read something, we not only understand a term or a topic, but we understand the context in which it's presented. And it's a big challenge, right, with natural language processing, and there's a lot of forward movement in that particular piece, that particular part of technology, really, where we're seeing, AI going, and that's really what we wanted to use. And if you've kept up with our again 3 webinars prior to this, this is something Blake and I are really passionate about, because I think anyone who's been in the professional world long enough realizes that how many times that we've seen someone get a job, maybe because they just, it was someone's aunt's cousin and they sent them their resume. And really, what we want to see is the right person get the right job at the right time. And the right time is really what we're focusing on here. So how do we take this data, this tens of thousands of job descriptions and resumes, how do we get quantifiable data out of it, and then how do we use that to help us make decisions? Because actual insight, as we all know, right, models are only as good as the insight that they provide, and basically our ability to take action on them. So the first steps here, and what you're going to see today, are the things that I just circled in or put this blue rectangle around. So we're going to discover terms and what exists in the unstructured data around skills, because a lot of times the challenge here is that people don't know what skills exist in, like Blake was saying, within their organization, and so that can be a big challenge. That can be something that is a challenge to quantify. It can be a challenge in terms of figuring out a baseline, where you need to go, etc. Then you need to explore topics. So you want to aggregate terms into topics that reflect organic groupings within data, right? So solutions engineer, systems engineer, we have a lot of different things even with the SAS. Figuring out how exactly to aggregate those skills into something that reflects an organic grouping that exists with that particular sector. So Blake, obviously, like we said, we've got similar jobs, but we are different. And how do we recognize that in a resume, especially when we don't know what our baseline is? This is the content. So you want to run these topics and rules that you're using based on skill gap specific business rules. So you want to add the business rules. You're going to use natural language processing, et cetera, to discover the terms, explore the topics, categorize the content, and then on top of that, each organization is different. So SAS may act on this unstructured data differently than a book, right? Or a Lyft. And I'm in the Bay Area, so I'm going to use area companies. But basically, that's something that that can really impact the way that we look at our data, that we apply these business rules. Now, to extend this, you would want to extract targeted content based on categorizations. You can extract more information. So once I've targeted what I really want to pull out of the resume, and you'll see this in our very first webinar, we actually took the information that existed in the resume and extended it after we had our topics to figure out what type of personality this person had. So not only were we figuring out what skill set they had, but it was also what personality they had. And that was helping us drive what teams to put them on. That was actually our next best candidate webinar. And so these are ideas and how you can extend unstructured analytics, how you can extend basically what we're doing right now to help you determine, not only what's in the resume, pull out the skills, but also how does this person present themselves in their resume. Again, taking it past, right, just reading and tagging and in more natural language processing, the human brain would understand it. And then you pair with sentiment analysis. So this is probably more of if you're bringing in manager stuff. So, if it's manager feedback based on, for the individual or things like that, that's where you could use sentiment analysis. And that will be further down the road. You won't see that today, but we have it. And it's something that is a very strong piece of our analytics software. Okay, so this is text analytics. This is something that we used, right, for this particular demo. And I just want to point out a couple of pieces of the interface. So here we've got terms, right? This is basically one of the most granular pieces of text analytics. And basically it's just going to pull out these different terms that exist within the documents. For us, we're going to create a document collection. And document collection is going to be, for us, a grouping of job descriptions. It's going to be what we're seeing in the marketplace, so we could be pulling from anything from internal reports that we have bought on the market, Forrester, Gartner, quadrants, things like that. Right? You can be mining all of that to figure out what exactly is existing, where we're seeing the market go. So, being familiar with text analytics, you're familiar with this. And then if you're going to aggregate these two topics. So based on where the terms exist within the documents and within the document collection, they're related and we aggregate them up to topics. Now, SAS does this automatically. However, if there's something, legacy system in place or a way that you prefer doing it, I know that, people can get very particular about how they want to aggregate terms to topics and then content and things like that. That's absolutely something that we can still work with and integrate with. This is just a way to get, again, that pretty deep insight pretty quickly. And then up top, you're going to see we've started to aggregate up to category. And the reason I'm showing you guys this is because this is what you're going to see when we actually look into the technology live, that we've aggregated what you're seeing in the blue square and the green square. We made that up into skill sets. So instead of seeing something that says like open source, Python, you would see open source programmer or things like that, right? So we're taking all of the information, all these different resumes, and we're taking the weighting, so how often they show up, how often people are using them, the context of that. Is it saying I'm a Python programmer or I worked with a Python programmer, two completely different meanings, all taken into account using the text analytics. Example of the actual project that we used. So the dashboard that I'm about to show you guys that looks at the forecasting and actually kind of has the end result. That is going to be after this. So that's going to be based on this and this particular piece of text analytics. So the again, topic name, on you've got the terms, and then underneath these are documents. So this is a way that if you want to, I kind of use it as a quick quality check. So I can select something in the terms, and it will highlight where it found it in the document. And sometimes it helps me make sure that I'm looking for the right thing, that I have asked the technology to do what I think that I've asked it to do. So I use it as a quick Q&A. But you also, obviously, you can see some of the documents that we're using, and these are resumes down at the bottom. On the left-hand side, you're going to see that SAS did a pretty good job, again, automatically of determining these different organic groupings that exist within the text. As we would, again, as humans, we would do it naturally in our minds. SAS is doing it using natural language processing. What we're going to focus on is actually the second grouping down, and it's C++ Python engineer software, right? So those are the terms that have been aggregated up into a topic, and they've been a fair amount of weight and relevance. And so they're that we took and we said, okay, that's what we're going to focus on for this particular demo. So we're going to look at someone who would be a software engineer, or like Blake was saying, right, so a solutions engineer, and we're going to see what that would look like according to data that we've been able to mine from those tens of thousands of job openings and things that we found on basically on the web. So that being said, this is the dashboard. Now, this, you know, Blake and I are really passionate about this subject. We talk about it all the time. And this is just kind of our first iteration of really how we would tackle the skills gap analysis, right? Because it's a big problem. There's 1,000 different ways to talk about it. I think everyone knows that it needs to be some type of unstructured text analysis. But what we did here is we wanted to say, okay, what's our current landscape based on the internal resumes that we've got, again, which is a previous webinar we did. What's the future in terms of what we need to be hiring for, or what do we need to be training the individuals for? And how can I look at how many individuals I'm going to need, right? So my employee forecast is going to help me understand exactly how many individuals I need hiring for. So it's that balance between, okay, if I need in September of, and of course you can see we made this in the spring, in May of 2018, I had 17,998 employees. And you can see right now when this is made, I have around 16,000. So I need to hire, right? It's not only about training, it's about hiring and hiring the right skill set. And not, so it's predicting it's what the skill sets we have now, how to bring those employees up to this future need, but also predict where the market's going to go and hire those individuals, like Blake was saying, before they get hired by someone else. And that's the really important part of this particular demo and the way that we used our technology. So you've got the forecast here, and we've got so engineering jobs. Again, we said that we're going to do this for solutions engineers, so that's how I built this, or that's how we built the dashboard. We have 2 skill types, right? So this is something I think that anyone who's an engineer or who's worked as a data scientist understands. There are really 2 main types of skill sets. It's a soft and a technical, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of people who've gone in for data science jobs or, you know, skills assessments, and you're asked to code something, or, you know, you're asked to kind of tackle this big case study problem. And that's one thing that we wanted to understand, but also, you know, we and I work for a software company where it's important to be interface with people, and it's important to be able to go out and talk to customers and do that kind of thing. So we also wanted to make sure we brought in the soft skill portion. And it's a good way to look at the employee as a whole person, right? You know, they want to be able to collaborate and communicate with their team as well as have the technical skills. So you're going to see that there are different colors and different size boxes. This was the weight that was applied based on how often the skills showed up in the data, basically in the unstructured data repository that we set up. So if we're looking at current, then how often that particular skill set or piece of technology showed up within our organization. If it's future, then it's going to be looking outward. So it's going to be pulling things off the web, looking at market research, et cetera, to figure out how often that stuff is showing up. And that's what provided the weighting for us. Again, a lot of different ways you could do it. That's just how we chose to do it. So from jobs, you're going to internally, we have Hadoop, R, basically analytics, right? SQL, reporting, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I decide to select a skill type. So let's say right now you're seeing everything, but I go, you know, for technical. And so I say, okay, I'm an R programmer historically. So if I select R, then what it's going to do is actually show me the individuals that exist within an organization that are incredibly good at that particular piece of technology. Now, the job fit, again, is for this where we see the job going, right? So that's the ideal skill set match. But this particular filter, the way it works, is showing me that, like, Mary Kubler is a wonderful R coder. For the job, you know, she's at a 62, which is a pretty solid score. But she's kind of to grow. And that's what Blake and I wanted to be able to, pass along to a manager. It's not just, this is where they are, this is where they need to go, and this is how you can get them there. So we are skills go into a soft skill set. You're going to see, and I think a lot of us that are in industry are going to see this, is engineers are becoming more frontline, right? So, and not necessarily with customers, but with each other. As data teams are growing and expanding, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of collaboration, and it needs to be. And so you're going to see that communication is something that as a lot of companies are going to be working on. How do technical teams and how to teach them the softer skills? Sometimes people that are in sales or people that are, that are interfacing with customers all the time are really focusing on, because we want to develop both sides. So I picked Michael, and I just highlighted if they were in the top quartile. So that's why he's green. It just draws my eye to him in particular. But you see that from a communication standpoint, or from a solutions engineer standpoint, he's got a pretty solid score. From a communication standpoint, this skill efficiency is a 3. This is the art and the science, right? If you're an HR person, this is where decisions need to be made. A 3 may be fine for someone who is a very strong solutions engineer. That may be a totally fine score, but maybe we want Michael to, start doing presentations for really big groups of people. So maybe a 3 is okay for other people, but it's not okay for Michael. So that's when we would select to send him to training. We'd say, okay, here's our communications training. We need to send Michael to that training. At the top, you have your future skills gap assessment. So when we're looking externally and pulling stuff in to say, okay, where is the market going? Same thing here. The squares and the colors reflect the weighting, how often we saw it, how important it was, etc. I click into, I'm a big Tensor fan, you're going to see that this showed up a lot, and its frequency percent is 7.74% of everything that we found. So as I am pushing things out to my HR hiring manager, or if I'm looking to say, okay, what are skill sets that we need to find in the future, that's when you're, okay, Tensor is something that we really need to start hiring for. If you get at the left-hand side, we'll do a comparison with Python. You can see here, we're talking about a company that has Python is on the right-hand side, which means that currently we do not have a lot of Python programmers. It's a skill set that is only 3% of our current landscape in the organization. If we go to future skills gap assessment, Python is in the far upper left-hand corner, 7.82%, which means that in the future, Python, and I think as we all know, Python is incredibly strong skill to have from an open source programming perspective. So as who's looking at HR, I'm going, okay, who's my Python programmer here in my company? Okay, we've got Marla Fountain, incredibly, strong Python programmer, but she's also in the top quartile, and she's only at a 3. She's not at a 5. So I'm going to want to send her to, I'm probably want to send her to further her Python skills so she can become an expert Python programmer. And then, right, we trickle that skill down into the rest of the employees that exist within our company. So kind of giving you guys an idea of the art and the science, right? Just on the left-hand side, will let me guide that in terms of target numbers, people that I need to hire. You could absolutely build this from a hierarchical perspective. This is just for engineers, but you could easily have this dashboard aggregated to engineers, so solution engineers, data scientists, statisticians, etc. I would probably make them by those kinds of groupings, but, you could have it grouped all the way up, right, to the entire company and then work your way down, depending on what you wanted to see. The thing about the forecast is that it's actually comparing 8 different forecasting models, basically ARIMA models to determine different lags, moving averages, et cetera, and it's picking as champion challenger best practices built on the back end, and it's picking the best fit from that perspective, and then obviously forecasting. And as you can tell, we're pretty accurate with that. So us these numbers, and I feel like, that's something that I can make decisions on. in the future. So with Blake, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you. And I've been answering a couple of questions as they've been coming in. I think, Brendan, we can probably open it up to some Q&A if we want.
All right, let's get back to our slide here. And some great questions during the webinar, so let's get right to it. So our first question is, hang on one second, let me make sure everything's right here. All right, so first question is, how do you build out competencies for jobs and for those for people?
Well, I would say competencies is the skills, and this is along with Ronald's question in the Q&A. Creating a data store and assigning those skills to jobs. I mean, SAS can serve as the technology to mine all of the job descriptions out there on the web to pull back information around specific job titles and then do the text analytics to identify which skill sets get assigned to which job, and so it can serve as in the service.
All right. Can this be used for creating career ladders or pathways?
Extended use cases, right? Once you've got a series of or your jobs and some map skills to it from the text analytics, you can start to see where some of the overlap is, right? I could even imagine doing the predicted job fit score against other jobs to see which ones are close neighbors, and facilitate some career path in that manner.
Okay. The skill to this seem very high. Can your typical HR analyst do something like this?
A good question. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, having been in the workforce analytics practice at Deloitte, and that's probably what Blake was about to say, and Blake, add anything that I missed. Can the typical HR analyst do this type of work? SAS provides visual or code-based interfaces for everything that you saw today. So I would say, using our technology, or familiar, if they're again familiar with open source, we integrate with that. They're able to start on this pathway. I think it takes all of us time to get familiar with something that's a really advanced technique. For the gate, probably not natural language processing and that kind of thing, but can they get started on this and start moving forward on this roadmap? Absolutely.
I'll add that my career path specifically, that in the example on the slides of mine, I was a consultant. I wasn't a data architect, but I was a consultant and a business analyst, and moved to a compensation analyst role within HR. Being exposed to SAS, certainly I was able to pick up enough to then be able to transition to the role that I'm in now, where I'm using the technology a lot more often. So sure, it takes time, but it's able to approach in a manner through a Google base, very similar to probably other tools that people have used. But you have text analytics in there, and you can drag that onto the work pane and pull in the data and start to play with it.
Companies that are just now starting off in this type of venture, what's the best practice for getting all the resumes into a data store so they could be mined?
So, the way that have it obviously all sitting in one location, right, in a server where we're storing it. I would say the practical way to approach it is, again, we're looking for that ideal. So you don't need 75,000 resumes, sitting in some data store. We have for, and I think what Blake would agree with, for any have that we want to know internal, so employees that are active in who has a certain type of ending of their relationship or tenure. AKA, if someone gets fired, you probably want to keep their resume because you want to be able to figure out if there are any trends and why those people are leaving. So you want to identify, you know, instead of just collecting everything, you really want to be strategic about what you're selecting at first, build that ideal, whether it's, you know, for a solutions architect, a systems engineer, a solutions engineer, figure out what resumes strongly represent that and what you want it to look like at your company. So people that are very productive or, you know, drive towards effective software for the customer, things like that. And then those to score again. So you don't have to keep all 65, 75, a million resumes or anything like that. Really finding what works for you guys and then keeping that, using that as your baseline and your score. Blake, anything to add to that?
And that's certainly a lot of internal focus too. Getting started on, you know, what skills are associated with a solutions architect and all of that data mining that you can do from the web. You can, once you've got the skills associated for solutions architect, just store which skills make up the solutions architect, and that's, you know, a row on a spreadsheet. And so it minimizes how much you need to keep holding on to you don't have to keep all of what you on the web. You can do the exercise, assign skills, and then keep that.
And for resumes, I think that there was another comment in this question. It made it sound like they was really referring to paper resumes. I think that probably the first step is moving to maybe a more online form to pull in data rather than having to rely on, you know, OCR to scan hard copies. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so OCR absolutely. You know, is what you would for scan copies, but depending on what you're using, I would say digital copies are going to be quickest and easiest, right? So anything that can be digitized. But if you have, like, don't let that stop you. If you have paper resumes and they're valuable and it's something that you want to look at in mind, OCR is really not a bad way to go by any means. And so that's something that can be used, obviously, and then all the data integrated with the digitized resumes as well.
Okay, all right. So how do you measure skill proficiency, especially for like soft or tech skills?
Just reading a question that someone sent to me directly. Go ahead.
Don't worry. So the way that you can measure these, the way that we measured it in the first webinar, when it came to proficiency, was with 4 graded models that basically measured how the person fit in the organization, how good they're at their job, how well they fit their culture, basically if we're going to accept an offer or not, etc. The same type of mentality would be good here. So from a skill proficiency standpoint, we basically said, okay, based on the people that we know that are very good at this job, how does this person look like that person? You could bring in certifications, anything like that. This is where what Luke was saying in terms of validation, we can group these people into like high, as you saw, right, 1 to 5. We had 5 different segments of employee proficiency within the skill set. It's important to, basically that's clustering, but it's important to understand that those individuals would need to be validated with the manager. You know, I don't think anyone wants to be, you know, segmented into a particular population just completely based on the algorithm alone. I know I wouldn't. So that's where Blake and I were saying it's kind of the art of the science, right? It needs to be validated, but initially you'd be clustering them together based on, again, those ideal profiles of the strong performers within that skill set that you need to identify.
Okay. Listen, I'm afraid that is all the time we have for questions today. Blake and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and for this webinar.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone joining.
Before we conclude, I want to invite everyone to connect with SAS on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Join and participate in the ever-growing SAS communities, which now has more than 180,000 members. Analytics Experience 2018 is coming up next month in San Diego with topics ranging from forecasting, text analytics, and machine learning to AI and IoT. This conference has something for everyone. Don't miss the keynotes, breakout sessions, pre-conference training classes, and much more. This is a great time to take your SAS certification exams, which are half price during the conference. And new in 2018, we're going to have a free hackathon. We're also taking over the USS Midway, offering attendees a once-in-a-lifetime networking experience in the San Diego Harbor. Take advantage of the many conference discounts. Director level and above executives and full-time students can now attend for free, while academic faculty and SAS partners can attend for half price. All can save by registering now to get early bird passes, $300 off, before they sell out this summer. To get more details and to register, visit sas.com/analyticsx. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We know that your time is valuable. We hope you found today's presentation both engaging and informative. For Blake Golden, Sarah Harden, and SAS, I'm Brendan Bailey. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.